Here we are with our stock that we've been putting the wipe on poly on. And the first couple times what we did is we just used a rag and took the poly and just wiped it on in long strokes all the way down. Then we buffed it out with some steel wool, just barely using any pressure. This time what I'm going to do is to get the finish further into the pores, give it a little heat. I'm actually going to use the steel wool to apply the wipe on poly. So I've moved my carpet back a little bit so I've got a surface for the buttstock to be on, that if it drips on it doesn't matter, it's not going to mess anything else up. If you have another area you can do it in, do that. But you're just going to take some of the poly and put it on and just kind of work it in. You can use a little bit of pressure but not too much because you don't want to take off any of the under layers. Each layer has been allowed to cure between 12 to 24 hours, and I think the longer the better on that before you buff it off and go to the next step. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a little bit of the poly and pour it out onto the steel wool and just go ahead and start buffing it into the wood. And that's literally all I'm doing, is just giving it a little pressure to kind of put it on into the wood. And I'm going to just proceed to do this along the entire length of the weapon. And I'm using small circular strokes. And it does go quite a long ways when you're using the steel wool. So just be aware, you don't need to use a lot of this. Alright, so here's what the stock looks like after it's been coated with the poly. A lot of people worry about the little flakes that are going to be left in by the steel wool, the little strands. That'll come out when you go to buff it the next time through, so don't fret about that right now. We'll get there in a little bit. Alright, here we are with the stock after we used the steel wool to rub it in there, and there are some fine fibers in here. Again, I told you, don't worry about that. That's going to come out because we're going to buff this one more time with the steel wool, and then we'll go to our next step. Every other time we've done this, I've said, just use very light pressure. This is the time before our final application that we're going to use fairly significant pressure to even out the finish. And this is where you really want to feel if there's anything in the finish that needs to come out. And go ahead and use some pressure. And you can see the sheen goes away over the areas that I'm working on. For instance, right here, you can see the demarcation between the two. So I'm going to feel here, feel some burrs and marks. I'm going to go ahead and give that some fairly good pressure with the grain of the wood. Really knocking that finish down. Coming into it, feeling it again. Is this painstaking? Yes. Are the results worth it? I think so. Here's the stock after a wipe down, after that final burnish with the steel wool. It's a hard burnish, remember. It is smooth. We've got a really good fill on the wood, and for all intents and purposes you could stop right here. I am going to go one step further, and I'm going to show you that in just a second. This is 600 grit sandpaper. It is super fine, like an emery paper almost. Barely any grit to this at all. This is what we're going to use. Let me get my pieces ready and we'll get to it. Just as a kind of a side note, you want to clean this crud off of your paint and your poly bottles, just because if this gets in your project, well, it's not insurmountable. It's just a pain in the butt to take care of. So just take some paper towels, wipe it off, wiping away from the mouth, and then try to pour with the cleanest side. So I'm trying to really get this side that's right here towards me clean so I can pour from there. Now, just for ease of showing this, I actually usually do this. I actually hang this up and suspend it and then work on it from there, just so I can show it. I'm going to be doing it right here. What you're going to do is you're going to take, I've got several strips of my 600 grit paper. laid out and ready for me to grab. I'm going to take some, I'm just going to soak it in the poly, and it's not going to adhere a whole lot. And then I'm going to take it, I'm going to get a hold of my stock, and starting at the very edge, I'm going to go ahead and start sanding in the finish. You are going to hear grit on there. You're not doing this real hard, but this will make an incredibly smooth finish when you're all done, because whatever you're bringing up with that ultra-fine sandpaper is getting ground into the finish. So I'm going to keep working on this, and I'll show you when it's entirely done, and I'll show you the final preparation that we do for this. You can also just take some of that poly with your fingertips and just bring it up on there, and then go ahead and work it in. And that would be just fine also. It doesn't take a whole lot, because it's already filled the wood pretty well, so you're going to be able to get quite a bit more mileage out of a lot less poly when you do this. This is the Gunstock after about 4 coats of the wipe-on poly, and I think I'm going to actually add another couple. I'm getting ready to surface it again with the 600 grit paper and just a little bit of water. Just going to spray it on there, and then nice light rub, and then we'll see how many more coats, if any, get put on this. So I put just a little bit of water on here, and literally all I'm going to do is take it and follow it up over to the top and then bring it back down. You see the water beads, and I've done this much of the stock so far, and I'll just proceed to do this to the rest of the stock. I'm going to start the final finish on this by using polishing compound. There are polishing compounds and waxes specific to firearms. They're almost the exact same configuration as basic turtle wax is what this is. I'm going to go ahead and do this and apply the finish to it. Take a clean white cloth, whatever you have laying around, and double it over, and just like applying wax to anything else, you get a small amount onto it. Just start working it into the stock. I'm going to start down here at the butt end of it and work my way forward using small circular motions, and this will take out any fine imperfections that are in the finish. I'm putting this on a little thicker so you can actually see it on the camera. You actually do, when you're working it in, you do put it on thick enough that you have a coating that's visible, and then you're going to go back and buff it all out. So you can see here I've actually coated this, and you can see the wax polish on there. And the directions state to use have a damp cloth, so I'm going to just take a little water and apply it to the surface. Then we go ahead and buff this out all the way before it dries all the way. Now, having finished the polishing with the actual polishing compound, we went ahead and we applied a layer of wax, and this is again just automotive wax that I'm using. There are firearm specific waxes. They're almost the exact same formulation, and this works really well. So just like applying it to a car, not in direct sunlight, you put it on. I do have quite a bit on here, so you can see it on the film, and we'll let this dry and it'll haze up, and then we'll come back and polish it out. We'll get a really nice shine out of it. At this point, the wax is hazed over, and I'm starting to remove it from this end using a circular motion. And I'll just work over the entire length of the buttstock, removing the hazing and shining the wax on the stock. You can already see there's a significant difference. Gives the finish a real nice appearance. Now this Very nice appearance to this stock. I am very pleased with how this turned out, and the owner I'm sure will be very pleased as well.